Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down some really fascinating political strategy from a recent Coffee and COVID piece. We're talking about connecting the dots, from these huge global negotiations right down to the nitty-gritty of local campaigns.
And welcome to the Lenny and Maria Sanchez Notebook LMvideos.com overview show.
All right, so what's on the docket today? First up, the Ukraine negotiations, then we'll pivot to a big narrative shift on crime right here at home. After that, we'll get into the Democrats' midterm strategy, and we'll wrap it all up with something the source calls the iron law of politics. Let's get into it.
So let's kick things off on the world stage. The source really hones in on this meeting between Trump and Zelensky. Now, this was supposed to be a one-on-one, right? A bilateral talk. But, well, it turned into a party pretty fast.
And this is where the commentary drops this incredible metaphor. It calls it clown car diplomacy. Just picture it, a tiny car, and suddenly all these European leaders like Macron and Merz just keep piling out, even though apparently they weren't even invited.
So, you might be thinking this is about unity, right? European solidarity. But according to this analysis, not so much. The argument here is that it all boiled down to distrust. These leaders felt they had to be there, uninvited, because they just couldn't risk being left out and didn't trust anyone else to look out for their own country's interests. Pretty telling if you think about it.
Okay, so this leads us to a really crucial term that kept coming up in these talks: security guarantees. The source describes it as being like co-signing a massive military loan. You're on the hook. You promise to defend Ukraine if it's attacked again. But here's the twist. The commentary argues this isn't a genuine offer of help. It's framed as a potential trap.
And to really hammer home the danger here, the source pulls out a pretty heavy historical comparison: the Vietnam War. Think about it. It started small in the 50s, with just advisors and weapons. Those were the guarantees. But then, over the years, it just escalated and escalated until you had 500,000 American troops on the ground. The big fear here is that we're seeing history about to repeat itself.
So what's the bottom line here? According to the source, this whole demand for security guarantees is not about peace at all. It's what they call a poison pill. It's a term designed to be impossible to agree to. That way, when Trump refuses, the deal falls apart, and he's the one who gets blamed for it. It's a strategic setup. But wait, the analysis says there's this huge piece of leverage that everyone in the media is completely missing. It's the tariff card. The argument is that Trump has the power all on his own to slap tariffs on Europe's pretty shaky economies. We're talking German cars, French wine, all of it. And that right there is a massive bargaining chip that's just been sitting on the table, totally overlooked. All right, let's bring it back home now. We're going to shift gears from geopolitics to the domestic scene, because the source points out this sudden, almost whiplash-inducing change in what the media is talking about. It's like everyone just decided to change the channel at the exact same time. So check this out. 1 minute, the dominant narrative is Trump is a dictator. It's everywhere. The very next week, poof, it's gone. And suddenly, everyone's talking about crime. So what gives? Well, the source claims it's pretty simple. The polling on that dictator stuff was just not good.
And for proof of this pivot, the commentary points to this specific quote from Representative Richie Torres. He's talking about public safety, and he says, "So what does that phrase, lived experiences, really mean in this context?" According to the source's interpretation, it's basically a quiet admission that the official stats aren't working anymore. People's day-to-day reality, what they see with their own eyes, is telling them a different story about crime. And when that happens, no amount of data is going to convince them otherwise.
All right, Section 3. How does all this talk about narratives tie into actual election strategy? The source breaks down what it sees as the Democratic game plan for the midterms, and it looks a lot like going back to basics.
The term for this strategy is triangulation, and the source uses a candidate like Jamie Ager in North Carolina as the poster child for it. I mean, look at the profile. These are white, male candidates who don't even really call themselves Democrats out loud. The whole vibe is local, folksy, talking about tractors and community potlucks, And they are absolutely steering clear of the big, divisive national issues. The play here is to be seen as just a good neighbor, not some political party loyalist.
Now, this number, 13, is so important because it really paints a picture of the battlefield. The article says you've got 13 Democrats trying to win in districts that Trump already won. Compare that to just 3 Republicans running in districts Harris won. That's a pretty steep uphill climb. It shows you the kind of structural headwind they're facing from the get-go.
Okay, so you've got these candidates who seem, on the surface, like the safest bet possible, right? They're moderate, they're focused on local stuff, So why on earth does the source call this a high-risk gamble? What's the catch?
Well, the answer, according to this analysis, comes down to one word: experience, or a lack of it. The argument is that the party's focus on DEI has, in effect, pushed out a lot of the more moderate, experienced politicians, leaving what the source calls a hollowed-out bench. So they're forced to roll the dice on total newcomers, people who've never actually held elected office or won a race before. And that is always a risk.
And all of this leads us to the grand finale, the final big idea from the source. It's presented as this fundamental, almost unbreakable rule of the game, the iron law of politics that supposedly explains how parties really think.
So what is this iron law? It's brutally simple. The source argues that political parties are basically businesses, and they hate risk. And in this business, only two things on a candidate's resume really matter. Number one, can you win? And number two, can you raise a ton of money? That's it.
And that's the whole ballgame. Ideology, purity, being the perfect candidate on paper, none of it matters as much as a proven track record. The goal is to win, period. So a party is always going to put its money on a sure thing, an incumbent, someone who's won before and has a donor list, over a passionate newcomer who's a complete unknown. It's just smart business from their perspective.
So, that brings us to the end. And it leaves us with one big question to chew on, doesn't it? The source lays out this world where everything from global summits down to a local race in North Carolina is just a series of strategic calculations, a series of bets. So the real question is, which bet is going to pay off? Which of these calculations is the one that will actually decide what happens next?
Thank you for listening to another session of the Lenny and Maria Sanchez Video Overview Show, produced and archived at the website notebooklmvideos.com.